Okay, everybody, welcome to our last andPlay and Conversation event of the 2021 series. And we are so excited to have some of our newest duo friends here in the Zoom boxes with us, Tracy Cowart and Sian Ricketts of the group Freelance Nun. And as we have mentioned before, andPlay and Conversation is made possible in part with public funds from Creative Engagement, supported by the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, New York State Council of the Arts, with the support of the governor and administered by LMCC. And once again, we're excited to also be supporting Word Up Community Bookshop with this event. And we will, a really great bilingual bookstore in Washington Heights. And so we will share some book recommendations. And then we can also share their information down on the page so you can check it out and order some books or see what they're up to. So that's all the business. But welcome, Tracy and Sian.
Yay, welcome
Hi
Tracy and
guys.
Sian.
Hi Hannah and Maya.
So we want to start out by just asking you two, like, what is Freelance Nun? Will you tell us about your duo? We got to see you two when we met you two this summer. So 2021, we met you this summer at Avaloq Farm and Music Institute, and you two were there doing residency, and you invited us out to your cabin, which was out kind of like in the woods, and you invited us for a late night concert, and it was just magical. We loved hearing you two so much. And we were like, we have to have them on our duos season. So tell us a little bit about yourselves and Freelance Nun.
Yeah. So Tracy and I have worked together as a duo in various configurations for over a decade. Yeah, over a decade. Starting first, I knew that we were gonna become friends when we were like, let's exchange keys so that when we lock ourselves out of our apartment, there will be someone else who has my key. That was our first partnership. Was like logistical apartment management.
It's a trust thing. Like, I trust you with late night bad choices.
Yeah. But no, we
to help me get out of them.
We co-manage a medieval ensemble together, Alchemy, and we also co-direct the Fordham Collegium together, which is a small but valiant crew of Fordham students and sometimes community members and sometimes friends that we get together for medieval music. But basically, I was thinking about this actually. I think the first music that we made just with the two of us together was when we were conscripted to provide entertainment for the Fordham University Medieval Department Christmas party.
Oh yeah.
And we had a pretty great time, and I still think we need to release a Christmas album.
I completely agree. We do so much as chamber musicians with other people that to do something with just the two of us felt at first, I would say, exciting and scary
and weird
because we're used to, and so it was a fun process for us to imagine how we would come up. There's so many sounds in our heads, and normally we can look at one of our colleagues and be like, hey, can you make this sound happen? And they do something. But when it's just the two of us and we have to come up with all those sounds ourselves, it was a pretty fun process.
It was pretty fun.
But we should say what Freelance Nun does.
Okay, so Freelance Nun. So that was kind of our first, we're making these sounds together as a duo, but during the pandemic is when we really decided we needed an outlet for the two of us because we were in a pod together. Yeah. We lived 10 minutes apart from each other in Brooklyn, so we saw each other basically every day, with the exception of one tragic month, the pandemic. But basically we wanted to make music that was unconstrained by style, genre, time period, or dimension, because we spend so much time thinking about, we're kind of, as early musicians, we're doing things across a broad range of time, but like very specific. We think about different choices depending on which century we're in, which country we're in, what genre we're in. Are we doing secular music? Are we doing sacred music? And that's part of the joy, is you find out so many things and then you make some informed decisions. But we wanted to have a platform to just make cool sounds across time and space.
Well, one of the fun things about being an early musician is you are exposed to so many different possibilities. But we try to kind of ground those in the milieu, if you will. But at some point you think, but what if we put them all together? And it doesn't, and like the medieval music we do doesn't really work like that. So we play with medieval music a lot and make experimental choices too on occasion, but to kind of come up with something totally new and use all the tools at our disposal.
And collaborate with whoever we want,
right,
including nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to not have to kind of just really answer only to our own hearts and souls.
Yeah,
which is pretty exciting because Tracy and I, despite the fact that we work together so closely, actually disagree on a lot of things. Which means that we both are kind of perfectionists.
Yeah.
Which means that we spend a lot of time in conversation about choices we could make, which is really fruitful creatively.
Truly. Yeah. And I think at this point we're very comfortable what some people would consider arguing, for us is like passionate discussion. And it's a fun window into like, wow, this person feels this person's reality is very different than mine. What does that
I say
even...
that to Maya all the time.
Yeah.
I feel like, something this summer when we were like listening to your incredible music, but it was also like the ways that you guys talked about your relationship and your like just your working relationship and your personal relationship. And we're like, these people are on our page. We understand what it's like to be us and have this type of relationship. But yeah.
You felt the same way. What do you guys, I'm just curious, what do you guys like, how do you engage with that
dynamic,
that frisson, if you will?
Well, I guess ours is not usually about music as much as it is about the rest of life.
Yeah, it's usually about just like how we lead, right? Like our choices in everyday life, even like small, like insignificant, like food choices, or like, I don't know, like it just, I feel like, well, but then also I just remember Hannah at one point telling me, I think it was like after a talk that we gave at university where I was like, not everyone's reality is your reality. And so like the way that I was speaking perhaps like was for people who like had also all the points of contact that I did. So then it was like, oh yeah, of course. And so it was just about like expanding and like imagining other people's realities, right? Like, yeah.
It's just, I think, become a little bit of a catchphrase sometimes where I'm like, Maya, and she's like, not my reality's not everybody. Like, something. She's like, can you believe this thing? And I'm like, yes, I can, because.
Well, it's one of the great things about close collaborations, right? Is I feel like we're constantly forging these bridges with minds and experiences that we get to know intimately that we would perhaps not otherwise go that deep.
Mm-hmm.
No, I feel like we live in a society where we're very used to yelling at each other self-righteously, but sometimes not always really engaging with someone else's very different experience. And I think that's one of the beauties of chamber music in general, but also duos are kind of very intimate in that regard, in that you've committed to kind of understand. I mean, this is like basically now we're talking about relationships, right? But with a duo, you've committed to working to create something with someone, which means listening to them and trying to understand them while also holding your own reality, sacred. Because if you don't have a place to stand on, like you can't build a bridge, right? So I just came up with that. I thought that was
I mean, I think there's something that's so important that like not only about the duo relationship, but the type of music that we're both doing, because I think we've always felt like a real affinity for early musicians as well, because even though like contemporary music and early music seem to be like too like as far apart as possible, they are so similar, and we're both really like creating things. Like you are recreating, but you're creating out of like history and knowledge. Like you guys are so smart, you know everything, but that you are like actively in the process of creating music from like air, thin air, which is like a lot of what we do as contemporary musicians too, is how are we going to create this new thing, like bring this new sound to life or back to life, if that's what you're doing. And so there is kind of the that bridge, like what Maya was saying, when we're working with like students who maybe aren't as experienced, of like, how do we connect this music making experience to like what you know about music, which is this thing that's always existed and is here and is ready for you, and you can just jump in on the train. But kind of finding ways to bridge that and make it feel more I don't know, that everything is of equal value.
Yeah, we definitely think about a lot about this as teachers, because something that we find so exciting about the music that we make, I would say the vast majority of the music that we make, certainly together, is music that like there's no recording. Like either no one else has grappled with it, or they've grappled with it in a way that is going to be totally different. So there's not a point of reference. Like you can't prepare for a rehearsal by like listening to the recording and studying the score on the train, because that's just not a thing. You don't have those resources. And we love that creativity. But what we found with especially young students who don't know anything, they're not ready to understand how exciting that creativity is, because they don't understand like what the framework of knowledge of norms are.
Right.
Like what are the conventions? So in order for them to actually be excited about manipulating these materials, they actually have to understand
what the materials
are first. And it's sometimes hard to put yourself back in that reality where you're like, if I didn't know anything, and also because Fordham University is not a conservatory, so people have sometimes like not as strong musical backgrounds as undergraduates as like I did, for example. Yeah, as a conservatory student, they're coming from like, they're really smart, they're really talented, but they don't necessarily have that kind of background.
They're like, I want to learn about music, rather than like, I already know a lot about music and now I want to, you know,
learn about a different genre of music. Yeah. So we're kind of always kind of balancing teaching them fundamentals and then also trying to lure them on the path of excitement
and experimentation.
Yeah. Well, and that's what like Freelance Nun is is doing so well. What you guys are saying is really like focusing and like moving full speed towards that experimentation phase of it, and taking like the materials that you do know, but using them in completely kind of different ways.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because while we say it's true, we do not want to be constrained by genre, time, space, or dimension. But of course, the instruments we have have their own constraints.
Wait, can we just say what your instruments are so that people...
Sure. Yeah. So we both sing. So that's our first instrument. That has less constrictions, but some constrictions.
And one thing that we're interested in experimenting actually as singers in this context, because I think that we're really interested in the Freelance Nun context, is actually exploring amplified music and mixing in electronic or synthetic elements. So one thing we're working on is working on vocal sounds that we wouldn't normally use, like a super quiet, breathy into the microphone sound, which is really interesting because we never would make that sound in our normal concerts. We're not singing to a microphone. So you never sing softer than you would be able to be heard above the ensemble.
Right.
And it's a totally different production if you're doing that.
Yeah.
So we're interested in that, and also some very loud chest voice sounds that perhaps we don't delve into because it sounds so wild to practice it.
Feral
We're
voices.
really interested in exploring new vocal sounds. But in addition to that, I also play a variety of early winds, including douçaines, which are kind of the great uncle of the oboe. They are a cylindrical, which basically means that the hole is the same width all the way down, and it's a very narrow hole,
tiny,
which means
it's as big as a hole punch, right?
Yes, which means that it's very low for its size, and it's also quite quiet in comparison to the early oboe that we know and love. The shawm is like the feral oboe, I like to call it, but it's definitely an outside instrument. It does not need to be amplified. Like if you're playing a set in a bar on shawms, you do not need microphones, which
loud
can be great.
Yeah. Always walking into those bars and there's just sets of people playing sets of music on shawms. And I'm like, I didn't know I was coming on shawm night.
You know, I have played one of my first shawm experiences actually was playing some sets in a bar with my teacher, which was super fun. And I do now, as of 2 days ago, also have shawms. We haven't integrated those in.
Very exciting.
Not yet. And I also play early recorders of various sizes, ranging from small to quite big. And if needed, I also do play the modern oboe.
Yeah, it's true. And what's for our viewers, like what's the normal range of a recorder?
So the normal range of a Renaissance recorder is an octave and a sixth, which is nice because that's really similar to that of the human voice, actually. And it's really similar to the ranges that we see written for in the medieval and Renaissance periods. They didn't write down like, oh, this piece is for recorders, this piece is for singers. There's just music and you decide what to apply it to. But the range of the recorders fits really well onto the typical range of what you would see in a lot of music. The douçaine achieves a lot with a range of only a tenth.
It's a great instrument.
You only need a tenth, guys.
I believe it.
You get a lot done.
It's interesting. So it means the melodies we do on those instruments don't go beyond that,
or not much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you would make different choices.
I mean, you can always just choose a different octave if you're playing a melody that exceeds your range.
Right.
Because
we
do what we want.
But I feel like that informs the kind of melodies that we are used to creating at this point. Like they tend to, like we're not, when we're making up melodies, they don't tend to be like Baroque opera aria, really exploring like a 2-octave range, which is something we both have done. But because of our instruments, and really because of your instruments, I think, and because the music that we're used to doing that worked with these instruments, our melodies are often
a range of an octave, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
Which is also just a pretty great range to sing in.
Range. Yeah, you can like make the text so clear.
Yeah.
You can like have a lot of fun with a range of an octave. You don't need to use a lot of like advanced technique to do it, which I feel kind of means that experimenting with a variety of different shapes and colors is more possible. Once you start really expanding the range, there are kind of certain things that help to do, which then make the sound like something perhaps titled classical or something like that. Yeah.
And then Tracy, you're on medieval harps.
I'm on, so I have currently 2 different types of harps. When I got my first harp, I was working as primarily a vocalist, but all my friends were jamming on instruments, and sometimes you can't sing all the time, and I was like, I just really want to have an instrument to play too, guys. And when I was young, the instrument I really wanted to play as a kid was the harp. And I grew up in a tiny town in Colorado, and my parents were basically like, that is just not practical.
And then she had to play the viola.
And it's a great instrument. But I started out on the piano, which was, that's a good instrument to learn on. Like they did get me music, but they were like, you're not going to find a harp in someone's living room. The piano's going to be really, really useful to you. Also, it's a 2-hour drive to get groceries. Like we're not going to get harp lessons. So anyway, I ended up on the piano. And then when we formed Alchemy, I said, will you put up with me getting a harp and learning a harp? And everyone said, sure, Tracy. So when I purchased my first instrument, I thought, everyone gets all these different instruments. Sean's got 900 recorders and, people get mini VLs. If I just do enough research, I can get the one harp to rule them all.
Which is hilarious.
I know.
It's really cute.
That was my instinct.
She'd never bought an instrument
I'd never bought an instrument before. So I really researched harps, and I got a Bray Harp, which is I always forget how many octaves it is. 1, 2,
I think it's
3.
3.
It's
3 and a half.
3 and a half.
It's the gamut,
3 and a
right?
fourth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got this Bray Harp, and its bottom note is an F2, and it's got these little wooden pegs, and so they touch the strings, and so when you pluck the string, it makes this very interesting buzzy sound, which the harps at this time, they were carved out of one piece of wood, and their soundboard was tiny, so they just don't have a ton of resonance, and the braids give them more bite to the sound. It also means the pitch kind of fluctuates wildly. It's always a question of like, do you tune to the attack or do you tune to the sustain? The sustains are really long, but it's like a quarter tone lower than the attacks. So it's this weird, but there's so much, anyway, it's a very cool sound, very buzzy. Some people say it sounds kind of like a sitar. It doesn't. but that kind of like those like twangy overtones
Yeah.
are I think what people identify. So I played that harp. Anyway, I got that harp, and then like within a year, I was like, I need another harp. And now I also want another harp. But that's my Bray harp. And then I got what we affectionately refer to as twinkle harp, which is slightly higher. It's more of a Romanesque harp.
It's also louder.
It's also way louder, but it has a soundboard.
It's pretty loud.
Yeah. So anyway, it's louder, it's high, it's aggressively twinkly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And both of these instruments, they are tuned. They basically are tuned in a diatonic scale, and I can fret them. They're built so that I can press above the note to raise something by a half step, but there's no levers, there's no pedals, and so what I tune it to is what the piece is going to be in, with the exception of maybe raising it a seventh for a cadence or something like that. And so, and again, just like tuning an instrument, you know, going back and forth between, say, like a piece with like 3 or 4 sharps and a piece with no sharps is like time consuming because you've got all these octaves, and also the instrument doesn't like it. It really likes to kind of either have B flat or B natural or F sharp or F natural, and so this is a long-winded way of saying
we don't get super wild in terms of key area.
No,
No, but you're doing other wild things.
Yes. Yeah. We explore, you know, what we focus on is more modal placement. And that's something that I, you know, when I first started doing medieval music, it was like, but how can starting on like, you know, an E, like in a Phrygian mode, whatever, it's still just a C scale transposed, right? You're just, and then like, you know, you listen to it and you're like, whoa, that's wild and different. So yeah, I would say that when we compose, our melodies tend to be modal. Mm-hmm. They tend to not be wildly chromatic.
So what is the, you talked about how you guys started playing, you know, the Freelance Nun project kind of evolved during the pandemic, but you are used to working with each other in many different contexts. And you talked a little bit about, like, you start by composing a melody, and I'm curious what kind of, like, if you could talk a little bit about the creative process that you guys go through in coming up with like new music to work on. Is it always like coming from text inspired, or is it a melody someone dreamed, or anything that?
Well, good question. And I would say it's still, we're still discovering that. So thanks for the ideas, but go ahead,
For
Sian.
me, I'm really excited about text. Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of great early texts that we know probably had music, but we don't have that music. So it's just an area ripe for exploration that also seems like, yeah, if this text was someone that inspired someone to make music in the 13th century, like, maybe it will also inspire people to think that it should have music now. What a great idea. But so for me, it's like picking a text and then thinking about kind of the meaning of the text and what mode it might want to be suited to. Mm-hmm. And then like making a melody that I like, usually sitting on my bed with my computer, singing awkwardly, or like a recorder in my hand, my tiny recorder in my hand, annoying everybody. And then thinking about, because we do also with medieval music, there's a lot of unrhythmic music that we do that we either sing unrhythmically or will work with imposing a rhythm. So sometimes, and I think for this music that we most recently put together that we're going to share with you guys, I created kind of unrhythmic and rhythmic versions. Mm-hmm. And then some of them we used both, some of them we only chose one. We like tried different things. Mm-hmm. But then it's like getting together where you're like, okay, I've got this melody, can I just sing it to you? And then we're like, okay, what do we think needs to happen? And then Tracy will just start making a lot of random sounds that are usually very compelling, and then we'll be like, oh yeah, that seems good. Okay, what needs to happen now? And then one of us, it's very, especially Tracy, she has a lot of ideas in the moment, and it's always astonishing to me because I'll think really, really hard and be like, Tracy, I have 2 great ideas. And then we'll be in rehearsal and she'll be like, I have like 10 ideas.
Also, your ideas are more fleshed out. Mine are more like darts, like pew pew.
But it is true that a lot of it is just kind of like getting to know and then improvising, and then Tracy might just figure out like, oh, she'll start playing some sort of exciting ostinato pattern.
I really like ostinato patterns.
And then she'll be like, does this seem like a good idea? And I'll be like, yeah, good. Okay, but what if we added this?
Yeah, and then I would say we start, we're melody based, and then rhythm, and then harmony. But really harmony is kind of,
we leave it a lot up to the moment.
Yeah.
It depends on if somebody is, like if I'm playing douçaines, and like in a counter melody, like bass, kind of like writing a bass line, then knowing what Tracy is doing with the harp is sometimes helpful. We have to make some decisions.
Yeah.
But actually, because like notes a whole step, like if I really think it should be an F underneath, but she's playing like G's and D's, actually that sounds pretty cool too. So sometimes we don't talk about it, and then later we'll talk about it and be like, is that what you were doing? You were switching between F's and C's and G's and D's every measure, and I was just playing a G the whole time?
It's also,
shocking.
The difference between sustains and plucks.
Right.
Yeah, for me, changing more makes kind of more sense, where Sian can just hang out on a note for a long time and it sounds really good. I feel like if you changed as much as I did, it could sound
really weird,
wildly acrobatic.
Possibly, or maybe good, but we're also just like, and we get different ideas based on like different music that we do in other contexts, or like our teaching that we're doing. We both did a lot of teaching last year, and at least for me, like I got many new ideas because I had to like learn things to teach my student how to do them. Right. And that was really exciting. But yeah, it's to answer your question, it's a little bit chaotic, our process.
But then how did you start incorporating electronics and the reverb that we heard that you incorporate this like really flawlessly and beautifully in your compositions? And how did that happen?
It happened two ways. One, electronics and amplification, they're so fun. Like I got into early music because I wanted to make more sounds than were currently available to me in the wonderful period. I never want to diss the romantic period because it's great. Some really great music happened. But when I started singing as a singer, it's kind of like, here are your leader. And I was like, this is fun, but I want more. And so I started delving into the centuries before. And, once I delved into the centuries before, then it was like, but I still want more. And the idea of just the distortion you can add, like the range of sounds you can, there's all sorts of colors. So that was part of it, just wanting to, just that fun process of imagining. I'm certainly not the first person to be excited by distortion and amplification.
Tracy has so many thoughts in her mind of what sounds she might be able to make. I feel like she needs the tools to help her crazy visions come to fruition. So
it's, and it's still, I feel like I'm scratching the surface. Like I just got into this. And so there's so much I don't know how to do. And that's really fun. It's overwhelming, but it's also fun. So that was part of it. And then the other part is that perhaps the more practical part is, as I mentioned, the Bray Harp, even with the Brays, it sounds so great if you're right next to it. And like we would do recordings and it'd be like, is someone even playing the harp? Like, I'm pretty sure that person is just pantomiming back there. And so I started experimenting with putting pickups on the instrument simply so when we were playing sometimes with modern instruments, I could not feel like just a sad wheel.
Heard.
I wanted to be heard. So I experimented with pickups, and then once you put pickups on an instrument, or contact mics, really, not pickups, but contact mics, once you go there, then it's like you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from, but what if I, put guitar pedals on here? And like most good ideas, I was pretty excited about that, and then you realize there's a harpist right now who's blowing up the internet with guitar pedals, and there's that thing. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. You're so awesome. There's also that thing of like, but I had this idea independently, I swear.
It's so good, Tracy.
But to say that, there's also this thing about the music we do that I think is funny, is we get used to thinking that everything we do needs to be like our own individual unique interpretation that no one has ever done or thought of before. And I sometimes have to remind myself that it's like we live in a world where we live in a world of ideas, and where people are taking the same idea and doing their own thing with it, or a piece of music and doing their own thing with it, that it's not cheating or it's not like, well, you should go back to the drawing board because somebody else has
also had this idea.
Right. It's like, right now I'm really obsessed with reverb, and I just want to be
she just wants more reverb.
I have not.
But I have to say, that came from, we did a kind of acoustic / amplified show with two friends who are in bands and do a lot of new music, amazing colleagues. And that, I think, was the first show that you had a ton of reverb on your vocals. And I think it just really infected her heart. She just wants so much reverb.
And there was that one concert, I'm forgetting the name, Arush, a concert I went to where, reverb's great. But I went to a concert where a woman was doing little cellular melodies, and I was really inspired by it. So where was I going with my desire to be dripping in reverb? Oh, it's the same thing. Other people have done this. I'm not the first person to want to do.
But it's okay.
But but I'm really into it, and so
But you're figuring out your personal musical voice, and
Tracy's personal musical. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the Freelance Nun sound, I feel like that was what we were getting to witness. It's that emergence.
Yeah. When we've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about it, we did integrate, and I think for these videos that we're going to share with you, we also are including my partner, who is an organist, but in the pandemic, his instruments, the first instruments that he bought were 3 analog synths, which he's been talking about literally for the last 10 years. I just really want to get some synths. And I'd be like, okay, sure. Do whatever you want, man. But basically he's the kind of person who is ready to go in really deep on a topic, which is really important if you've got some analog synths. And so he just spent many months only thinking about synths. And so we have had some entertaining times actually hooking up Tracy's harp to the synth.
That's been fun.
And then we can get even more noises. Yeah. It's been pretty fruitful. Yeah. So we adopted him into some of our arrangements as well, because we were like, we can have even more weird noises if we have the synthesizers.
Freelance Nun Plus.
Freelance Nun Plus. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what you're going to share today?
Yes.
Yeah.
So these are pieces, they're texts that we took from 13th century Iberia. There was this genre that was super popular in this time and place, thousands and thousands of pieces called cantigas de amigo. And they are pieces that are written specifically, usually from the feminine perspective. And you're usually sadly singing that your lover is far away and you want to see them. Often the sea is involved, so it makes sense based on where they are. If your lover were to go somewhere, probably by sea is a pretty reasonable guess. And often also with themes of being connected to pilgrimage sites, I'll meet you at this popular site. So it's weird. They're a little bit of part romance, part travel marketing.
Yeah, hey, come to Vigo. All these ladies are on the beach.
They're all really lonely.
Their lover isn't there yet.
Which is hilarious. And of course, we don't know how that actually played out in the 13th century, but we have a lot of fun imagining it. But there's a ton of texts, and only one set of these, it's 7 pieces that are one narrative set, do have music, which we've worked with and we really loved. But there's all these texts that don't have music. And we had actually worked with this scholar of the Cantigas de Amigo, and he had told us his favorite set. And so we decided to set those to music, which we're also really excited to share this with him. He knows we're working on it. It's amazing because we found him on academia.edu, and we're like, hello, we're working on this. Can we use your translations? And he's been such a helpful resource. But he actually lives in one of the pilgrimage sites that the songs sing about, of course, at Vigo, overlooking the bay. So he's hanging out in Portugal.
Yeah.
We're excited to share with him the fruits of our labors. But basically, I set a few of these to music, and they're really gorgeous. They often also, a trope that you see is you're asking like the natural world, like, have you seen my lover? Often you're asking the ocean, but in this you're actually asking like a doe. You're asking some deer, like, hey, have you seen my lover? I'm so lonely here.
It's really beautiful imagery. Just,
Yeah.
you know, imagining looking around and there's something kind of both peaceful and poignant about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did for these, we're kind of using a combination of early Iberian words and also English words.
Yeah.
Because we wanted, you know, English speaking humans to also maybe understand what is going on.
Yeah. Another connection point.
Yeah.
In the green grasses I saw the deer running, meu amigo. In the green fields I saw the white stags, meu amigo. And glad by these I washed my hair, meu amigo. And glad by these I washed my braids, meu amigo. I washed it, I tied it with gold, meu amigo. After I had washed them, I tied them with gold, meu amigo. I tied it with gold and waited for you, meu amigo. I tied them with gold and was waiting for you. Amigo, in the green grasses I saw the deer running, meu amigo. In the green fields I saw the white stags, meu amigo. And glad by these I washed my hair, meu amigo. And glad by these I washed my braids, meu amigo. I washed it, I tied it with gold, meu amigo. After I washed them, I tied them with gold, meu amigo. I tied it with gold and waited for you, meu amigo. I tied them with gold and was waiting for you, meu amigo.
So we're going to share a piece by Bethany Young that she wrote in 2018 that we commissioned called Ing, 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 in two. And so this was a really amazing collaboration with Bethany, where she, months before the piece was supposed to be finished, she sent the electronic track. So it's for violin, viola, and a track, a pre-recorded track. And she sent us the track, and she asked us if we had, like, while listening to it, if we had any like thoughts, if we had any writings that we could kind of share with her. And it was just like, she was using her voice, she was manipulating her voice in this piece. She has this like really specific way of using it. And so I was super inspired, and I wrote this. She wanted it to be something that, like, there was something that was like glitching sometimes in the track. And so she wanted the words to also glitch. And so there's all these like repetitions, like the ing, ing, you can hear that even in the title. And so I sent her these words based on listening to the track multiple times, and those are incorporated into the piece. And Hannah and I are basically, I mean, we are using our voices, and I guess when you keep talking about like your chest voice, we're like just kind of screaming. And I mean, there's like screaming at pitches, and like there's like fluctuations, but it's definitely very involved, and it was really fun. It was also very much a learning curve for us when we first started to be able to coordinate these vocal moments very closely with our playing, but then also usually there's a lot of like da-da like happening between our two instruments and voices. So it was a really fun working progress, and then we keep being able to perform it, which is really amazing.
Yeah, and it also has, like, in the beginning, kind of like theatrical like movement tied to it too. And so there were just like all these different ways that it was like a very full body musical experience. And I think especially like we're whispering, and we're, you know, like doing like vocal kind of fries and screaming, and all of these different ways of like really turning our like bodies into our full instruments with our instruments. So it was a really interesting project for us. It's been so nice talking to you guys and like learning more. We could talk for hours, I feel like.
Too.
I think we forgot to mention this to you, but do you have any book recommendations of things you've loved recently that you would like to recommend?
Oh my gosh, I have to say the book that I read the most recently and loved is like The Beautiful World, Where Are You? The Sally Rooney book that I know that you've also recommended in your newsletter. I couldn't endorse enough. I'm such a fan of Sally Rooney. So secondary endorsement, but my major last reading project that I did was that I reread for the second time all of the Dune novels, which I don't know if I want to say that I recommend it.
She was so grumpy about the whole process, and she's like, but I'm still doing it.
I find some things about that world so compelling, and I loved the movie, actually. My not book, but book-related movie recommendation is go see Dune. The music is pretty great. The visuals are amazing. Maybe don't read Dune if you are a really feminist lady,
or even a little bit of a feminist,
unless you're really just like ready to grapple with some thoughts and feelings about what people thought about women in the middle of the 20th century.
But read Sally Rooney.
Read Sally
where
Rooney,
you're at.
but also maybe read Dune. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I want to recommend something that I feel is really appropriate for a conversation about duos. And it's a book that Sean is my main book purveyor. She reads a ton, and then she'll be like, you'll love this. And I'll be like, great, thank you so much. But a book that Sean recommended and lent to me was This Is How You Lose the Time War. And who's that by?
I do not remember, but it's written by two authors in collaboration. And it's an entirely epistolary novel.
Between two entities. Cool. And it is one of language-wise and thought-wise and world-wise, it is such a beautiful book about a partnership through time and space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say on the partnership front, if you haven't, sorry, I'll just throw in one more book recommendation, which is there's a trilogy, the first two books of which are out, but the first book is Gideon the Ninth, and the second is Harrow the Ninth.
Yeah.
And if you do read it, you'll understand why I might bring this up, as it's also kind of about duo partnership.
Totally. Yeah. Lady duos.
Yeah. And it's just so beautiful. It's so weird. It is described on the cover as being a lesbian necromancer murder mystery in space. And all of those things are a little bit true, but what that does not capture is that it's just such a fun thing to read. The prose is so exciting and weird, and the storytelling is also exciting and weird, but ultimately has like deep emotional resonance as well.
Yeah. It's a young adult novel, and I cried.
Young adult-ish.
I mean,
we think it's like, what is young adult? It's written about people who are in their late teens and 20s, but some of them are immortally arrested in that stage, and they're actually thousands of years old.
So at that point,
it's a construct.
It's
those are some incredible books for us to check out. We're gonna have some new things to read.
Some new andPlay required reading for this month.
And please report back to me. I love hearing about people's experience reading books. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
I guess our last thing is just if you guys have anything to plug, right, Maya?
Yeah, like any social media or concerts in December that you are excited about.
Or Freelance Nun or other your other projects.
Well, I would be remiss we'd be remiss as co-managing directors of Alchemy if we didn't mention that we have a concert broadcast of a concert that we recorded of 15th century French music from the female perspective.
Yeah.
And it is broadcasting this Sunday at 3:00 Eastern time, but also available for almost the next month until
Okay,
December
because
10th.
this will come out after that, but hopefully the video will
Yeah.
still be available. Yeah.
I think it'll still be available.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if not, you could also contact us at info@alchemy.org and we can make it available to you.
We have the power.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for
Joining.
talking with us today. We can't wait to see you again in person and hear your music again in person and all of those things.
Thanks.
Yay.
Yay.
Bye, guys.
Really good to see you.
Bye.
Bye.